Hey everyone, welcome back to the lab. In this video, I kind of wanted to answer the question of what is HAMY LABs? I get this in a lot of forms, often not verbal. People are just kind of confused about what I'm talking about here. And so I kind of wanted to answer that. Now, I think this is a pretty valid question because HAMY LABs has been a lot of things over the 10 plus years that it's existed in some form. It's had many different forms. It's had many different kind of outputs and even different names at times, but it's always kind of existed. So even if you've been following along this whole time, I can understand why this is like confusing. So what I want to do in this video is really just kind of give an updated vision for what I think this is in 2023 and kind of also going forward. So if you don't get anything else from this video, this is what I want you to take away from it. And that is that HAMY Labs is a venture studio. What is a venture studio? That's a cool word that I found yesterday when I was researching startups. And so hopefully this means what I think it means, which is basically just an org that is continually trying to launch some sort of venture, often a business, that kind of makes some money. And that's what I'm trying to do here at HAMY Labs. Is that actually what that word means? I don't know, but that's what we're going with. So if you're still here after that TLDR, let's just kind of continue with the rant. So to formalize this a little bit, the whole HAMY Labs thesis is that the mission is to build a better world. That's kind of why I'm building this. If you have followed any of my reflections before, you'll notice that this is also the same mission as my create bucket, my domains that I kind of like organize my life in. And while you don't necessarily need a mission, I think it's good to like have it for directional purposes. Even if it's a bit generic. Like, I don't think anyone would say, like, their mission is to make the world worse, but, good to make it explicit, I guess. And now, I think the strategy is, like, the more interesting part, and this is kind of the, the unique insight that I'm trying to experiment with and win with, and that is to try and do this through simple, scalable systems. Now, I've talked about this a little bit here on the channel, touched on it a few times, but I don't think I've really given it, like, as in-depth explanation as it probably needs. But basically, the insight is that I think most of these systems that are created for business or for life are like way too complex, and then we build these complex systems that don't scale. And so if you can just focus on making simple systems that also scale, you are probably going to beat out most players in an area. And that's the thought, that's the idea. That's something that I'm still going to be experimenting with because who knows, it might be wrong. But that is the core of HAMY Labs. Okay, so that's like a lot of vision stuff, but like what does it actually do? And I will answer this with another kind of like vision-y, non-concrete answer. And that's basically that it follows the creation cycle. I've touched on the creation cycle here a few times, and I have my updated version of what I define that as linked here. But basically it just goes through the three big steps that I think all kind of effective creation goes through. So first is just the observation stage of just like seeing opportunities in the world or in a domain that you're focused on. The next is to just creating experiments to try and leverage these opportunities for whatever your end goals are. And just noting that all of these are experiments because we don't actually know anything. So if you think it's not an experiment, well, it's probably just, sitting on a foundation of assumptions. And then the next one is to reflect. So I think every time you create something, every time you do something, there's probably something that could have gone better. It's very unlikely that you were like actually perfect at this. And so just creating a habit of doing that every time you go through an iteration, go through a cycle, I think that's how you get really long-term big wins and benefits. And together, this is what I think like basically any form of creation needs to have to be effective. And so that's what HAMY Labs does. But like, what can you actually expect from HAMY Labs? Okay, so there's a few more concrete things that you can kind of expect to come out of this venture studio, if you will. And the first one is obviously the creation. So what are we actually creating with these creation cycles? The big thing is obviously experiments in whatever form they are, because that's kind of how you understand ground truth better. That's how you strategize better. It's kind of how you even know if what you're doing is the right thing or not. But I think that these will probably come out in two main forms. One is kind of the businesses that I am running, or at least experiments that could turn into businesses depending on the outcomes. And then the second big one is the code. I still really like technology. I still really like coding and building things with code, even if it's not necessarily like the most effective way to do things. So that's something I'll probably continue doing and sharing here as well. Now, probably more relevant to you if you're watching on YouTube or watching this on my website is what am I actually going to be sharing about here? That's probably how I got to this video in the first place. And I think that the things that I'm going to keep sharing about fall into about 3 buckets. So one is like the businesses and startups and probably the experiments that I'm running. And particularly around like why are we building things the way we're building? What are the kind of principles that are central to these things? And of course, like what did we learn from going through this whole process? The second one's around the creation cycle, which is really just around like how do we build things effectively? How do we create things effectively? I've only been in the workforce like 5 years, which to some is probably like a lot, and to some is probably like not a lot at all. But I think there are rampant inefficiencies with how we just create things of all kinds. And so I think if we can focus on just kind of this generic, pretty effective way of doing this, we can actually get pretty large gains for very little effort. Again, simple scalable systems. And then the final bucket is technology. I've always really liked technology. I'm going to keep coding. I'm going to keep trying to try out these new ones and build things with it. So this is more around like the what are we actually building? How did I implement this library to do X? I'll probably still keep sharing this as long as it's kind of like useful in what I'm actually building. And for those on YouTube, I've made it super easy to see all these buckets. Should be in all the playlists. And I've also got a bunch of playlists for each of the different kinds of like tags, so you can check those out there. As always, if you want to follow along on the journey, this is where you can reach me. Although not really Instagram so much anymore, but I'll get that updated. And if you want to do more than follow, also want to support, I've also got the Hyminian membership access, which gives full source code repos that you can download and run on your own computer. Discounts on all these creations, the products, the businesses, etc. And you also just support me making more of these. So thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next one.